Cool.
So why don't you start and introduce yourself, Nick?
All right. I'm Nick Smith, and I'm zooming in from far away North Hollywood. And I've been telling stories with Inland Valley Storytellers for about 20 years, or a little over 20 years, I guess, and in other places for even longer.
Okay, who wants to be next? Penny?
Well, am I? Yes, I'm alive. I am from Hingham, Massachusetts. I lived in LA for 30 years, and Nick pulled me into the various solstice programs to teach workshops when I was way new and unexperienced, and it was wonderful. And I still reference back to those workshops. It was just great.
And tell us where you live.
Hingham, Massachusetts.
So thank you for staying up to join us.
Uh,
That's right. It's 3 hours later.
Okay, and now let me spotlight Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Chodine. I live in Ontario, and I've been a groupie since this 2000, I guess. No, it was a little before that. Anyways, going to all the storytelling festivals, and I love it.
Okay, and that's all the Zoom people, I think.
Nope, got one more.
Adrian.
Oh,
I
Adrian.
have a question. I can't see everybody. I can't find a view logo.
All the way up in the right-hand corner?
I know where it's supposed to be, but it's not there.
Okay.
I have sign in and I have leave meeting. Okay. And I don't want to leave meeting.
Oh,
So
if you do gallery, you see everybody on the Zoom.
Yeah, I don't have that option. That's the problem.
Oh,
so
that's weird.
what are you seeing?
Leave meeting. Okay.
But you don't see anybody?
Nope.
Did you have a
Yes, I see the
bottom?
top. I see the top 5 or 6 people. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all it's going to show you with the
That's-
settings that John has at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll just live with it. That's okay.
Okay, Adrian, you're next.
So, hi, I'm Adrian. And as John said in his very, kind introduction the other day at the concert, I've been hanging around here since 2011, so 13 some odd years, and telling in all the various concerts since 2012 and loving it. And yeah, and blaming Nick for getting me started in this whole thing. Those wonderful solstice festival workshops and such. I miss those solstice festivals. Those are amazing. And I do, full-time online writing, editing, consultation for high school, college, grad students, professionals, writers, doctoral students. So my life is about writing and editing and everything, but when I'm in the classroom, I love to do like what Nick was saying, do more of like the storytelling approach to things. Although, yeah, I have much to learn from you, my friend Nick, on how to do that as well as you do, because it's stealth. You do it by stealth, and it's awesome. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Adrian. And now I'm going to switch the spotlight to the people here. Now you'll see more people.
I'm just going to leave.
There we go. Good.
Yeah. Now, can you see more people, Penny?
No, actually, I'm going to leave and come back in and see if.
Okay, and see if it's better.
Yeah.
Okay,
It seems I've been trying to figure it out and it's not working.
so I'm going to go around this room and one at a time.
Okay, I'm Ina Haugen. I live 15 minutes from here. So it's hard not to walk over. And I'm more of a listener than a storyteller. I'm Chris St. Clair, and I'm really good at listening.
I'm John Geddes. I'm also pretty good at listening. I was here 2 years ago in person and told a few stories about my father, and I'm going to tell a few more tonight. And the rest of the time, I've just been listening on Zoom and see a lot of familiar faces here, so it's good to be back.
Good to have you back.
I'm Glenn Brandt. I've been a member of Inland Valley Storytellers for 13 years. Since 2011, like Adrian, I am a storyteller and speaker, but a storyteller that needs to get his act together and get more inspired. That is my existential struggle.
Okay.
The audio isn't coming through very well. I don't know if there's a way to turn it up.
Oh, it isn't, Tom.
You're fine.
Yeah, oh,
I
John,
wonder,
only
Yeah,
your
then-
voice is coming through well. The other people farther away are not coming through.
and it
It's
could
just
be
this-
when I was holding the computer, I maybe had my hand over the microphone
Oh, that's all. Okay, good.
because I'm
I
not.
think that,
It's on my
Well, don't
lap.
do that.
So my
yeah,
name, my name's John St. Clair, and I'm the leader of this group, live in Ontario, and have been a member since 2003 when my lovely wife invited me to come to this meeting of storytelling because she thought I would enjoy it, and I did, and I've been coming ever since. That was in the spring of 2003. So, does anybody that's Zooming have a story to tell? We'll kind of start with them.
Yeah, sure, I've got one.
Okay, let me switch the spotlight. Okay, Nick, and I'm going to sit down. I'm going to put you on the chair, or not you physically, but the computer.
I'm sitting down, but far away from your chair.
Yes.
Well, this is in a way connected with the story that I told at the concert on Saturday, because it's another one where there are stories like this from all over the world, and it's fun finding the ones that nobody seems to tell or has heard of. You see, Balul and his mother were poor. They had a little house, and they had a goat. And his mother decided to sell the goat so that they would also have food so that they could buy things that they needed. And being the mother, she sent her son to sell the goat at the marketplace. Balul took the goat, and it was a long walk to the marketplace, and he was sort of hoping to run into someone on the way. He had even decided on how much money to ask for the goat. 10 dinars would give the mother and son enough money for quite a while, and who knows, something else might come up. Well, the strangest thing happened, because as he was walking along the road to town, as he was going through the hills where the traffic was not exactly heavy, and he was walking along by himself except for the goat and the owl that was sitting on a stone by the side of the road. This owl did not fly away as Balul and the goat approached, and seemed to be looking at him and at the goat. And Balul said, "Owl, you seem to be interested in my goat. Are you interested in buying it?" He didn't think he would get an answer, but he thought he would have some fun by asking the owl a question. And the owl said, "Ooh," just once in response to his question. "Well, do you have money that you could buy my goat? I would like to get 10 dinars for it." And the owl said, "Ooh." "Well, where's the money then?" "Ooh." I see. So you have the money, but not here. Is that what you're saying?" "Ooh." "I know. I'll leave you the goat. I'll go home and I'll come back tomorrow to collect the money. Is that all right with you?" "Ooh." So Balul tied the goat to the stone where the owl was sitting. The owl watched. He looked at the goat. He looked at Balul, and Balul walked away. Balul walked back to his house, and his mother said, Are you back so soon? You sold the goat already? And he said, yes, but I won't have the money until tomorrow. Until tomorrow? Who did you sell the goat to? Well, you see, as I was going through the hills, there was an owl sitting by the side of the road, and he seemed very interested in my goat. And after a conversation, we decided that he wanted to buy it and he was going to pay 10 dinars, but not until tomorrow. You had a conversation with an owl and sold him the goat with the promise to pay tomorrow? Well, yes, he said he had the money. How could an owl tell you that he had money? And where would an owl keep money? And what are you doing? You've sold our goat for nothing to an owl. No, 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 no. We'll have the money tomorrow. Well, Balul's mother got one of those looks on her faces like mothers get when their son has done something colossally foolish. But she thought, maybe we'll have money tomorrow. And so they got up in the morning, and Balul took his mother along the road to where the owl was again sitting by the side of the road on a stone. But there was no sign of the goat anywhere. Balul went up to the owl and said, well, I've come back for my money. And the owl said, woo. Yes, yes, you were supposed to pay me today. Woo. Owl, I want my money. You've got my goat. You told me you were going to give me the money today. Where's my money? Now, as he said this, Balul approached the owl with his voice rising a little bit in volume, and the owl jumped up off of the rock and flew away toward the hillside into a little crack in the hill where there might be an opening. Ah, said Balul, I know. The money must be in there. And his mother, watching this, said, what? And Balul followed the owl into the little cranny in the hill and came back out with 10 dinars and handed them to his mother and led her home because she was too astonished to really think about this. And it wasn't until she got home with the money and her son that she said, where did this money come from? Oh, well, it came from the owl's treasure hoard inside the little cave. The owl had a treasure hoard inside the little cave? Yes, he had a big pot full of money, and I took the 10 dinar that he had promised me and came home. I still don't know what he did with the goat, though. Well, the mother said, let's go back tomorrow and see if we can find out what happened to the goat. I mean, he might have some use for it, and I would very much like to see where you got this money. So the next day, Balul led his mother back up into the hills, back to where the owl had been sitting, but the owl didn't seem to be there on the rock today, so perhaps he was off taking care of the goat. He said to his mother, the money was inside that little cave there. Remember, I went in and I came back out with the money. Now, Balul's mother had been prepared for something like this to be his explanation because owls don't normally keep treasure. They're neither thieves nor dragons. And so it's something where there must be another reason for there to be a hoard of treasure inside the cave. So she had prepared because if she brought back the money, Balul was not the kind of young man who would keep his mouth shut. And if it belonged to thieves, he would say the wrong thing and she would get into trouble. And the thieves would come back and harm them and re-steal the money. So what she had done before her son got up that morning, she had cooked some beans and some chickpeas and put them into a little bag and hid the bag inside her skirt. When her son told her where this money was, she walked up, looked, and there was a little cave. And inside the little cave was a pot of money with markings that made it look like it belonged to thieves. You know, the kind of things that are warnings, don't steal this because we will come and kill you kind of thing. Owls usually wouldn't mark that on their money, even if they kept money. So she thought, this money was stolen by thieves from someone and hidden here, and they never came back for it. So if I take the money away from thieves who haven't come back, we'll have money to live on. She wrapped the pot, carried it outside, and she told Balul, it seems okay with the owl for me to take this. And so they walked back home. But she walked behind Balul. And every once in a while, as they walked along, she would reach into the little bag that she'd hidden in her skirt and pull out white beans and chickpeas and toss them up in the air so they came down on Balul. Well, he was very surprised that it was raining beans and chickpeas, but you know, as they walked along, he caught some of them and ate them and said, these are almost as good as yours. I wonder why it's raining them today. Oh, we've had strange weather lately, said his mother. And they continued their walk home. He continued eating the rain of chickpeas and beans, and they got home, and she sent Balul out to amuse himself. Meanwhile, she buried the pot of money where he wouldn't have seen it buried and wouldn't know where to look. Well, he wandered off and found some of his friends and said, you'll never guess what happened earlier today. His friends couldn't guess, of course. Well, after I sold my goat to an owl, my mother found a treasure and brought it home. His friend said, you sold your goat to an owl and your mother found a treasure and brought it home? When did this happen? Well, I sold the goat yesterday, but my mother brought the treasure back while it was raining chickpeas and beans earlier. Didn't you notice? No, we didn't notice it raining chickpeas and beans earlier. And behind his back, his friends started laughing at him because he was telling one of his crazy stories. But nobody seemed to believe him about the treasure. And when he went home to his mother, Mother, nobody believed me about the treasure. And she said, what treasure? There are the 10 dinars you were paid for the goat, but that was it. But, 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 and he thought to himself and realized maybe he was dreaming about the chickpeas and the beans because nobody else seemed to have heard of it. And it's not something you would ignore if it was happening. Oh, well. And so he went off to being the same foolish son that he usually was. But for a long time, his mother seemed to have a little bit of money for whenever they needed it. And so that is the story of Balul and the owl.
Thank you, Nick. That was great. Okay, anybody else on Zoom that would like to tell a story?
I have one, partly because I'm trying to rework it for
A good place to do it.
yeah, because it's a fun story, but okay, so as someone who likes to because I'm doing stories this Friday at a women's luncheon at a church in Upland, and I like to do stories of strong women and clever stories, and this one, it's got some cleverness in it, but I don't know, I just feel like I need to tell it from another point of view. So let me tell it from the point of view that it's written in, and then I'd be interested in thoughts about ways of maybe retelling it so they don't seem like such ditzes in the story. And this is the Grimm's fairy tale about the 12 dancing princesses. There's a king who had 12 beautiful daughters. They slept in 12 beds, all in one room. And when they went to bed, the doors were shut and locked. But every morning, their shoes were found to be quite worn through, as if they'd been dancing all night. Nobody could find out how it happened or where they'd been. When the king made it known in all the land that if any person could discover the secret, find out where it was that the princesses danced all night, he should have the one he liked best for his wife, and should be king after his death. But whoever tried and did not succeed after 3 days and nights should be put to death. So the son of a king from a neighboring kingdom soon came, well entertained, and the evening was, he was taken to the chamber next to the one that the princesses lay in their 12 beds, and he was going to sit up all night and watch where they went to dance. And in order, that nothing might pass without his hearing, the door to his chamber was left open. Well, this king's son soon fell asleep. And when he woke in the morning, he found that the princesses had been dancing all night, for the soles of their shoes were full of holes. Same thing happened the second and the third night. So the king ordered his head to be cut off. And after him came several others, but they had all the same luck, and all lost their lives in the same manner. Now, it chanced that an old soldier who'd been wounded in battle and couldn't fight any longer passed through the country where this king reigned, and he was traveling through the woods, and he met an old woman who asked him where he was going. "I hardly know where I'm going or what I had better do," said the soldier, "but I think I should like very well to find out where it is that the princesses dance, and then in time I might be a king." "Well," said the old woman, "that's no very hard task. Only take care not to drink any of the wine which one of the princesses will bring to you in the evening. And as soon as she leaves, you pretend to be fast asleep." Then she gave him a cloak and said, "As soon as you put that on, you'll become invisible, and you'll be able to follow the princesses wherever they go." So when the soldier heard all this good counsel, he determined to try his luck. So he went to the king, the father of the 12 princesses, and said he was willing to undertake the task. Again, he was well received, as the others had been, and the king ordered fine royal robes to be given to him, and the evening came, and he was led to the outer chamber. And just as he was going to go lie down, the eldest princess brought him a cup of wine. But the soldier threw it away secretly, taking care not to drink a drop. Then he laid himself down on the bed, and in a little while began to snore very loud, as if was fast asleep. When the 12 princesses heard this, they laughed heartily, and the eldest said, "This fellow too might have done a wiser thing than lose his life in this way." And they rose up and opened their drawers and boxes and took out all their fine clothes and dressed themselves at, at the looking glass and skipped about as if they were eager to begin dancing. But the youngest said, "I don't know how it is while you are so happy. I feel very uneasy. I am sure some mischief will befall us." "You simpleton," said the oldest. "You're always afraid. Have you forgotten how many kings' sons have already watched in vain? And as for this soldier, even if I had not given him the sleeping draught, he would have slept soundly enough." When they were all ready, they went and looked at the soldier, and he snored on, didn't stir hand or foot. So they thought they were quite safe. And the eldest went up to her own bed, clapped her hands, and the bed sank into the floor, and a trap door flew open. The soldier saw them going down through the trap door, one after the other, and the eldest leading the way. Thinking he had no time to lose, he jumped up, put on the cloak which the old woman had given him, and followed them. But in the middle of the stairs, he trod on the gown of the youngest princess, and she cried out to her sisters, "All is not right. Someone just took hold of my gown." "You silly creature," said the oldest. "It's nothing but a nail in the wall." Then down they all went. At the bottom, they found themselves in the most delightful grove of trees. The leaves were all silver and glittered and sparkled beautifully. The soldiers wished to take away some token of the place, so he broke off a little branch, and there came a loud noise from the tree. When the youngest daughter said again, "I'm not sure all is right. Did you not hear that noise? That never happened before." But the eldest said, "It's only our princes who were shouting for joy at our approach. Then they came to another grove of trees where all the leaves were of gold, and afterwards to a third where the leaves were all glittering diamonds. And the soldier broke a branch from each, and every time there was a loud noise, which made the youngest sister tremble with fear. But the eldest still said, "It was only the princes. They were crying for joy." So they went on till they came to a great lake. At the side of the lake, there lay 12 little boats with 12 handsome princes in them, who seemed to be waiting there for the princesses. Now, one of the princesses went into each boat, and the soldier stepped into the same boat with the youngest. And as they were rowing over the lake, the prince who was in the boat with the youngest princess and the soldier, he said, "I don't know why it is, but though I'm rowing with all my might, we do not get on so fast as usual, and I'm really quite tired. The boat seems to be very heavy today." "Oh, it's only the heat of the weather," said the princess. "I feel it very warm too." On the other side of the lake stood a fine illuminated castle from which came merry music, horns and trumpets, and they all landed there, went into the castle, and each prince danced with his princess. And the soldier, who was all the time invisible, danced with them too. And when any of the princesses had a cup of wine set by her, he drank it all up, so that when she put the cup to her mouth, it was empty. At this too, the youngest sister was terribly frightened, but the elder always silenced her. They danced on till 3 o'clock in the morning, and then all their shoes were worn out, so that they were obliged to leave. The princes rowed them back again over the lake, but this time the soldier placed himself in the boat with the eldest princess. And on the opposite shore, they took leave of each other, and the princesses promising to come again the next night. When they came to the stairs, the soldier ran on before the princesses and laid himself down. And as the 12 sisters slowly came up, very much tired, they heard him snoring in his bed. So they said, "Now all is quite safe." Then they undressed themselves, put away their fine clothes, pulled off their shoes, and went to bed. In the morning, the soldier said nothing about what had happened, but determined to see more of this strange adventure, he went again the second and third night, and everything happened just as before. The princesses danced, each time till their shoes were worn to pieces, and then returned home. However, on the third night, the soldier carried away one of the golden cups as a token of where he had been. As soon as the time came and it was to declare the secret, he was taken before the king with the 3 branches and the golden cup. And the 12 princesses stood looking behind the door, listening behind the door to hear what he'd say. And when the king asked him, "Where do my 12 daughters dance at night?" he answered, "With 12 princes in a castle underground." And then he told the king all that happened, showed him the 3 branches and the golden cup, which he had brought with him. Then the king called for the princesses and asked them whether what the soldier said was true. And when they saw that they were discovered and that it was of no use to deny what had happened, they confessed it. And the king asked the soldier which of them he would choose for his wife. And he answered, "I'm not very young, so I'll have the eldest." And they were married that very day. And the soldier was chosen to be the king's heir.
That's it, right?
That's it. Yeah. And I was thinking, I mean, I was working on this with one of my students who, you have to retell the story in some way. And I thought, maybe I could tell the story through the eyes of the maid who has to prepare the shoes every night. Maybe, maybe at the end, the soldier is willing to take his reward, but gives credit to the old woman in the woods who helps him, because there's just something in me that sort of balks at the idea that, okay, you finished your quest. Now I get to pick one of the girls to marry. It's like, so I don't know. I'm trying to think of another way to tell the story that isn't just like where the girls aren't just like so passive.
I have a couple of problems with the story itself, which is why I never tell that one.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is that they're not strong women.
No,
The
exactly.
second is that actually the oldest one, the one that he marries, is creepy and callous,
Hmm.
because it's like she doesn't care that these other guys have died because they're playing
Right,
this joke on them.
right.
And the third is that the story never resolves the fact that the young one, who is the intelligent one, we never find out what's next for her out of all of this.
Yeah.
Um,
And I was thinking if
then
there's
there's
a
the
way to
whole
turn
thing.
it around and make her the heroine at the end or something. But yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
so
go ahead.
I don't know if I could use that one as a story related to strong women, because it just isn't.
Yeah. I know. I'm thinking, what's the deal with the old woman in the woods, and why does she know all this? You
Well,
know?
clearly, okay. See, here's the thing. That part made sense in the terms of the stories that the Brothers Grimm collected, because they frequently patched elements of two different versions of a story
Mhm.
together in order to create them. But the princes under the ground and with their setup were clearly not human princes. They were of the other world.
Mm-hmm.
And so was the old woman. So she would have known it because she knew of where they were going and what was going
Hmm.
on there, not that she was
Yeah.
watching the princesses.
Well, and as I was working with my student on this, I said, you notice how there's no mother, there's no queen in the story? What if that old woman in the forest is the queen and she left for some reason? And maybe she shows up again at the end and she says to the soldier, you don't get to marry the oldest one, she's a jerk. Um, you know, why not the smart one? Or something like that, who can, match you for your bravery or something. I don't know. I thought about doing it something different like that. So, I mean, it makes sense. They patched stories together. I don't know. Those are great observations, Nick. Awesome. Yeah, this one's giving me trouble. Anyone else have a thought on that too? We can't hear if you're speaking from the room.
I wouldn't have any trouble at all thinking the way to solve that problem is to have the old woman in the woods turn out to be mother to the princesses and step in.
Hmm.
I've watched my daughters.
Hmm.
Some of them are foolish, some of them are cruel and selfish, but one is pure of heart. Take her.
Except she isn't.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, that the younger princess is smarter, but she's not pure of heart either.
Yeah.
Because she's going along with this thing that's killed off a
Mm.
bunch of people.
You know, rivalry is real, but also sibling loyalty, which she,
Mm.
would I be willing to tell the world that my brother was an axe murderer? Possibly.
You might wonder what's going to be in your orange juice the next morning at breakfast if you do that. Well, maybe I make an alteration where the youngest one sort of objects to, drugging the guys every night. And it's like, this isn't fair. We shouldn't do that, and that might then resolve that pureness of heart thing. I don't, I don't know. That might help. I might have to rework this and not tell it on Friday.
Yeah, it might take a little longer than that to really do a good job of recreating
Yeah.
the story.
But I definitely think the old woman turning out to be the queen, the mother of the 12 daughters, and some other way of her sort of being pivotal at the end, I think makes sense, because if it hadn't been for her, the soldier would have perished the other way the other men did. So,
Except then you have to explain the cloak, because there's still the magic that's available to her.
mhm.
So maybe in keeping with the Grimm type of stories, she could be connected with the queen. She could be the godmother that the queen had asked to look over her children,
Ah,
who just
okay.
happened to be fairy godmother type. That happens in
Yeah.
the stories.
Because then we have sort of almost a Cinderella kind of thing where, the girls go out at midnight and dance at the ball. And okay, I have to give this some thought.
Oh,
All right, I'm done. Thank you, you guys. This is awesome.
All right, anybody else on Zoom that has a story?
I'm not telling. Penny?
Do you have anything to tell, Penny? No, I don't hear
Sounds
you.
like
Oh,
Oh.
here she comes.
Yeah, she was muted.
There we go.
No, I am fascinated to listen to this, but I do not have very much input.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so now we will put the spotlight here at the forum. And do you have a story?
The timing of this story is utterly perfect.
Okay, let's have you stand over here, and then after you will be John. And if I need to adjust it so you fit, that look good?
Sure.
Okay.
On Saturday at the concert, I told my original Scottish story, the only one that I had at that time, but I have come up with a second one, thanks to Clara Murphy and her workshop. And I've reworked the tale from her brief little story into a longer story. And the timing of it goes very well with an event that we should all be familiar with of late. In days so distant and past that only the faintest echoes of them ever reach the ear of me, the fair folk became divided. Fair folk get their name from how beautiful they are, but their beauty comes from the beauty of their hearts and grace. And some of them grew jealous. But they were equal in power. They were not easily killed. They were not easily fought. And it looked as if their whole way of life could come to an end. Their king didn't know what to do until one of his wise men said, tomorrow there will be a darkening of the sun. And the king went to the great jewel, the enormous ruby that was the heart and soul of their people, and went out into the sunlight and waited for the darkening of the sun and cast his mind and power into it and created the fair folks' boy. And any of the fair folk who were loyal and good could be anointed with that oil and could turn themselves invisible at will. With this great power, they were able to force the not so beautiful ones out of their kingdom, restore their way of life, and everybody thought it was perfect, but there was a consequence. With great power often comes a great cost. And it was found that only during an eclipse, a darkening of the sun, could fair folk see. And therefore their people began to wither away and vanish. And they went up into the higher hills and hid from the sight of men and weaved their lives and became creatures of legend. Laura was renowned throughout the kingdom as the best midwife anyone had ever seen. Her own child and husband had died in an illness that swept through the kingdom some years before, and so she lived her whole life around the pregnancies of any of the humans around. And it was not unusual for her to be sitting in her chair at night, rocking in front of the fire, and have a panic stricken male rush in and say, it's time, my wife needs you, it's time. It happened a lot. But of course, other times it was, we think we're starting labor, and life was calm and the woman was brought to her. Both things happened some of the time. There were no known pregnancies anywhere near her one spring evening, and she was sitting in her chair thinking, maybe I'll go to bed, when suddenly there were hoofbeats rushing toward her. A knock came at the door, and a man called out, can you help me? What do you need? My wife, she is in labor and in trouble. Can you help me? Well, of course I can, sir. She picked up her bag, stepped open and opened the door, and there was a very tall, very fair looking man standing there in beautiful clothing. Come with me, he said. He led her out, and there was a horse. Not an ordinary horse, for this horse was of multicolors and had wings. Nonetheless, the man scooped her up and she rode off, and they rose into the air and flew off. And they were passing over the places she knew. She could see them below us. And they were literally rushing right at the side of the great stone cliffs of the mountains. And she thought, we're going to crash. We're going to be killed. Why is he moving? We should have. But what should have been a crash was nothing. They passed through the side of the mountain and into a great chamber, beautifully lit. And she saw strange things. She saw some fair folk. They were beautiful. But she also saw buckets seemingly carried along in thin air, and an amble working itself. The man kept hurrying her along. He brought her to his beautiful palace. She is in there. Can you do anything for her? Laura went to the struggling elf woman. She was beautiful and tall and seemingly very strong and in great distress. It took her but a few moments to determine that the baby was turned the wrong way, to his feet first, and what's worse, face down. This was a deadly situation. Many women have lost their lives in such situations, but she only had one chance. She had to try and massage the belly. Now, whether it was her great skill or the fair folk princess's great strength, somehow the baby was turned. And birth followed not that long after. The man said, wait right there. I'll be back in a moment. Don't do anything. And he came back in with a pot of ointment. And he said, anoint this child from head to toe, and then get every drop of it off of your hands. Do not keep any for yourself. Well, I was not familiar with people who anointed their babies with oil. It had been a custom of centuries. And so she set to work, but it had been a trying birth and a very exhausting hour. And as she was working, she wiped the side of her face and then got the baby set. I am, said Tom. You have saved my son's life. You have saved my beloved Elsbeth. Normally, a mortal that is brought into this kingdom is never allowed to leave. But I cannot repay your kindness with that. Come with me. And he carefully led her by back streets, back out to the stable where the great winged horse was, and took her back to her own home, and left for her a tiny purse. She didn't know much about it. She would have done this for free. She did it for free most of the time, and didn't pay much attention to the purse the next day, as she didn't know quite how to go about thinking about this whole thing. What could people believe her if she said such a thing? But she found while there were only a few coins in the purse was never empty. So for the first time in her life, she didn't have to think about, how will I get money for food? What shall I do with the remaining days? And she decided that she would go to the spring fair She hadn't been in many years, but there would be things there that weren't available in her village, and she could now afford to buy a few trinkets. And so she made her plans. Finally, the opening of the great fair was coming up. She set off down the highway, walking along with others. Finally, they reached where things were set up. And of course, all the great nobles and all the wealthy were there. But as she walked along toward the fair, she began to notice that there were people, beautifully dressed, handsome, wonderful people, all of them fair to look about, all of them taller than average, going about fair business, riding on rides, buying food. It didn't seem like anybody else noticed them. Her neighbors and her friends that had traveled with her made no comment on these magnificent people. And then she saw him. She saw the father of the little boy she had delivered. And she rushed up and said, "How are you doing? How is your wife? What did you name your son?" He looked at her with great alarm. "You can see me?" "Well, of course I can see you." "Can you see me with both eyes?" "Well, I don't know." "Yeah, no, just this eye." His hand shot out and grabbed at her face and plucked her eye, and her face immediately healed over. And she heard his voice saying, "Tell the one." And so she did some trinket shopping and she whatever, and she walked back home thinking, "I will tell no one, for I have brought fair folk into the world. Who else save?"
Thank you, Ron. I remember that story. I think it was at the same workshop you were.
Uh-huh. And I just couldn't leave it at the simple tale she told.
Right, right. You added the beginning part.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very good. Nicely done. Now, can I assume neither one of you have a story tonight? Okay, so John, your turn.
Okay. Thanks, John. This will be a little change of pace, I think, from the stories that we've heard. But I've been asked to give a half-hour speech commemorating Memorial Day, talk in front of a group in front of the University Club. So I wanted to practice it and asked John if I could, and he said I could. However, he suggested I cut it in half, so it's about 15 minutes long. I won't go through the full half hour here. So I'm interested also in any comments you might have as far as some of the stories, or just a series of stories about my father. So all ears for any sort of constructive criticism. So today I'd like to share my dad's stories about his time in the Navy when he served in both World War II and the Korean War. When World War II broke out, he enlisted in the Navy and became a pilot. However, he almost didn't make it out of primary flight training. The trainer plane that they used in the Naval Air Base in Los Alamitos was a Stearman biplane. This plane was also appropriately known as the Yellow Peril, because the pilots were young and inexperienced, and there were many close calls. One day, the cadets were circling the airfield practicing touch and go landings. After my dad made his final landing, he taxied over to the hangar. All of a sudden, there was this tremendous crashing sound, and his plane stopped dead in its tracks. He turned around and saw that the student pilot behind him had landed directly on top of my father's plane. The airplane propeller missed his head by less than 5 feet. It was only later that my dad fully realized that he had missed getting killed by just a fraction of a second. And in his understated fashion, he called this a close scrape. During the war, my father was stationed in the South Pacific in Palau, which is a beautiful South Pacific island group there near the Philippines and about 1,200 miles south of Iwo Jima. The first leg of the deployment was to fly his PPY from Coronado Naval Air Base, North Island, I should say, and they had to fly from Coronado to Honolulu, some 2,600 miles away. To go that long distance, they needed to add a large fuel bladder to the plane, which added a tremendous amount of weight to the plane. Base commander did some calculations and figured that the runway was probably long enough for the plane to take off. My father said he questioned the commander, "Are you sure about that?" My dad told me that the painfully slow rollout of the heavy plane was absolute torture. They just barely cleared the end of the runway as it staggered into the air. With the added fuel weight, the cruising speed of this PBY was only 115 miles an hour. It took them 24 straight hours to get to Honolulu. Now, as someone who's been to Hawaii a few times in a jumbo jet, I just can't even imagine how miserable that must have been. During World War II, my dad flew on several air-sea rescue missions for planes which had ditched in the ocean. One day they were asked to search for a large amphibious plane which had gone down about 200 miles from their base. As the sun was about to set, they finally picked up the plane's emergency beacon, and they were able to verify that the crew was still alive. A destroyer was dispatched to pick up the crew. However, until then, my dad's PBY circled directly overhead over the down plane at 800 feet in a tight figure-8 circle path. Night quickly set in, and the three crew members were flying on full instruments in complete darkness for the next 6 hours. It was physically and emotionally exhausting to be constantly changing directions and counteracting the G-forces of the plane. My father said it was the hardest flying he ever experienced during the war. But in the end, there was deep satisfaction in saving the crew of that plane. I should also mention that my dad actually personally shot down a plane himself as a Navy pilot. At the time, he was flying a twin-seat Kingfisher float plane, which was armed with a .30 caliber machine gun. One day, he was doing gunnery practice with several other pilots some 60 miles offshore. Suddenly, his engine froze and it began spewing heavy black smoke. My father was forced to make an emergency landing, which was a dangerous open sea landing, and finally made it down. Although he received official credit for shooting down a plane, it turns out that he always had to admit to be extremely precise that the plane that he shot down was actually his very own. My father also flew the two-seat Dauntless dive bomber. Although it was used as a bomber earlier in the war, my father used it as a utility plane. He was stationed on the island of Peleliu for 8 months right after that brutal combat operations that ended there. He worked closely with Admiral Blackjack Reeves to deliver communiques by plane and also flew the Admiral himself or his senior staff to some of the other islands of Palau as needed for military consultations. The Admiral was the senior commander of the region's carrier task force. He got his colorful nickname by being very gruff and imposing towards his subordinates. Being selected as the Admiral's personal pilot was a great honor for my father, and they apparently got along very well. Although my dad loved flying the planes, he had a powerful premonition that he would be killed in a plane crash one day. It was with good reason, because many skilled pilots were leaving the service at the end of the war. My father had seen a couple of his buddies killed because of careless maintenance errors. One day, my dad was getting ready to take off from the Naval Air Base in Alameda in a 42U Corsair. However, his radio malfunctioned and he had to return back to the hangar to get it fixed. As he stepped off the plane, he was horrified to see that the flap on his left wing was in the up position and the flap on the other wing was in the down position. Nobody in the ground crew had noticed this, and his cockpit controls from the cockpit had been set correctly. If my father had tried to take off in that configuration, the plane would have flipped over and crashed upside down, which would have killed my father. He was so furious about this incompetence that he threw off his parachute in disgust and stormed out of the hangar, and he never flew again. My dad's career as a Navy pilot ended on that day. However, my father still wanted to stay in the Navy, so he transitioned to serve on a ship by attending the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. When the Korean War broke out in June of 1950, my father was the operations officer on board a Gearing-class destroyer named the USS Forest Royal. This was the third most senior position on the ship. He managed Combat Information Center and also sonar division, among other duties. Within just a few days, they deployed on an emergency basis to the Korean Peninsula and remained there for almost 12 straight months. The destroyer was the flagship for minesweeping operations and also provided artillery support for our troops there. The seas off the coast of North Korea were very rough much of the time. It was physically exhausting for the entire crew to maintain their balance while on duty. One day, in extremely heavy seas in the middle of a turn, the Forest Royal keeled over to 45 degrees. If she'd gone over any further, she would have capsized. As you can imagine, destroyers are built for speed but can be vulnerable to capsizing. I'm showing pictures during this whole speech, so there's one that's showing that. My dad said it was the closest ever that he ever came to lose a ship. This near disaster was traumatic for everyone on the bridge. Another time, while the Forest Royal was moored at Chinampo Harbor, a large untethered sea mine was spotted drifting directly towards the ship, towards their ship. Unfortunately, there was not enough time for the Forest Royal to start her engines and to get out of the way. A Navy SEAL team was quickly dispatched from the ship to see if they could nudge the mine away, but they could not. The mine was also too close to blow up. The Navy SEAL in charge said that he believed that the mine would probably pass around 3 feet from the hull of the destroyer, but not actually hit it. If the mine had made contact with the Forest Royal, it would have caused tremendous damage and likely would have sunk the destroyer. Fortunately for the Forest Royal, the mine floated by just barely 3 feet from the hull as predicted. The Forest Royal definitely dodged a bullet that day. During the costly Chosin Reservoir evacuation by our Army and Marines, she played a role in supporting them as they headed towards the coast to be picked up by the other ships. The Chinese were attacking our guys from the hills on either side of the escape route. It was during this time that my dad received a tense call from a liaison Marine officer on shore and told them they were being attacked by a hilltop trench by about 300 Chinese troops, and they needed artillery support. My dad had set up a communications link between the destroyer's gunnery officer and the Marine officer on shore and got the map coordinates and relayed them to the gunnery officer. And after a few adjustment shots, my father ordered all 6 of the destroyer's 5-inch guns to open up. They fired well over 100 rounds in just 3 to 4 minutes. Most of the attackers were either killed or were forced to retreat. My father and the rest of those involved were thanked profusely by the Marine officer on shore. He said that many of his Marines were likely saved. The entire crew on the Forest Royal felt pretty good that day. After the Korean War, my father was assigned as an executive officer on an aircraft carrier, the USS Siboney. It was a nice luxury for him to be on such a large ship. One time, not long after they deployed for the Mediterranean, a full-blown hurricane suddenly descended upon the aircraft carrier. Unfortunately, this was before the days of weather satellites. They had no idea that this hurricane was out there. With winds of 80 to 90 miles an hour, the waves were so strong that they actually peeled the deck back from the bow of the ship, just like opening up of a can of sardines. Not long after the Siboney returned to Virginia for repairs, my dad felt he couldn't bear being away from his young family on those long deployments. He resigned from the Navy and decided to pursue a career in education. However, my father still participated in Navy events over the years. As I mentioned earlier, Peleliu held great significance for my father because he began flying from there for Admiral Reeves right after major combat operations had ended. Out of the 28,000 who fought there, almost 2,000 of our Marines were killed and 10,000 were wounded. Although over 6,000 of our Marines were killed in Iwo which was a larger battle, the devastating 45% casualty rate on Peleliu was among the highest in the entire Pacific War. The sacrifices that our Marines made were never far from my father's thoughts. Unlike those who we're honoring here today, my father survived the wars that he fought in, and he was able to live a full and satisfying life. He was very grateful for that privilege because many of his buddies never made it home. My father never forgot their sacrifices. My dad passed away at the age of 97 and is buried at the National Cemetery in Miramar. When he died 4 years ago, there were only about 3% of those who fought in World War II who were still alive. My father and the many others in the greatest generation who fought in World War II left us a priceless legacy, which we should always remember. They sacrificed greatly and helped to save our country and much of the free world from a ruthless and powerful enemy. Looking back, I don't think we'll ever see the likes of them again anytime soon.
Now, did he write a book?
He did write a book, yes. That's what it was based on.
So you got the stories from the book?
Yes.
All right.
Because I brought a copy of the book last time, I forgot to do it this time. And I'm going to have pictures during this whole speech. I think it adds quite a bit to it.
Yeah.
I refer to the pictures, but. So did all those stories make sense? Or did you?
Yeah.
There was.
Flowed together fairly well.
Mhm.
Hey.
I was unclear about how he shot his own plane down.
Yes, that's very interesting you say that because I gave the speech to some others and they also thought that maybe he shot another plane down. They weren't clear about how he shot his own plane down or even if he did. So I added a phrase there. I thought, maybe I didn't say it, but that to be very clear, precise, he did shoot his own plane down, but I don't know if that.
So they were doing artillery practice and
Yes.
he accidentally hit his plane.
He hit his, what happened is, I guess I didn't say it, but the machine gun timing device dislodged. Because of that, he ended up shooting his own engine and shot his own propeller. And that's why his plane went down.
Well, you need to actually say that.
But yeah, you know what? I think I actually wrote that out. I don't think I actually said that.
Yeah.
That would have helped at that spot.
Yes, that would have helped.
Yeah.
I've heard of the timing of machine guns and propellers and how precise it had to be. It wouldn't take much of an error to suddenly find yourself blowing your own engine apart.
Yes, precisely. That's exactly what happened too. So, but I was trying to make a little bit of a funny story, like he shot a plane down, so everyone's thinking he got into a fighter pilot type fight, but that was not the case. So, but yeah, I need to make sure I include that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's it for the stories. Just a quick statement. A bit closer here. I had time to crunch the numbers for our storytelling concert Saturday, and we now have a balance of $939 in our checking account with Wells Fargo Bank. And starting tonight, we are now paying $50 and actually $25 an hour, but our meetings always go longer than 1 hour. So we no longer get it free. So the balance is going to start to shrink because the Claremont Forum has a new manager and they decided to start charging us again. Before COVID, we were paying $35 per month to use this facility. So it's an increase in price. And we'll have to see how it works out. I mean, this facility is nice in that we've always been with the Claremont Forum, so it's a known quantity. And we get to use the Wi-Fi so we can do the Zoom. But I might start looking into seeing if we can find some other place that's cheaper. And if any of the rest of you have any ideas, let me know.
How much is this gonna cost again?
$50 a night, so that's $600 a year. And our balance right now is 939. So
I have to say that $50 a night is actually on the cheap side still. You'll find that any place that you have to rent, that's more like what you would pay per hour.
yeah. Well, they wanted to charge more. But I talked them down. Because I said, well, we just have to leave, in which case they get nothing.
Yeah.
They wanted to do $50 the first hour and $25 per hour after that, which essentially would be $75 a night.
Like the space is used.
Exactly. You know, if we don't rent this space, they don't have any income for this time. So
That's true too, yeah.
We hit the same kind of a problem, which is why we changed our festival at the end of the month up to here.
yeah,
And that, change of administration at the church, and suddenly what had been free for 4 years is now being charged. Well, we wouldn't have been able to hold the story swap. We would have had to simply cancel it because our group couldn't have paid the rent. Wouldn't have sold enough tickets, couldn't have paid the rent. That'd have been the end of the story swap.
right.
We did manage to get ourselves arranged to be at the Friends Meeting House here in town on the 27th. If any of you out there did not know that, please come. Or if you're not going to come, buy a ticket anyway, because the group really needs its income.
Yeah. And it's a $200 rental
Yeah.
that needs to be covered, plus the workshop presenters are being paid. So
I did check with the Garner House, but I didn't get, they were thinking it was like a one-time rental. And I wonder if we could impress upon them that it'd be a monthly income for them if we could get it for that price or less, because they have that room downstairs that is used as a art gallery sometimes
where is that?
inside Memorial Park, that old building.
Would they have Wi-Fi?
I don't know that they would have Wi-Fi, and then the second thing is, I don't know that anybody's there to unlock and lock it. And so they would want to charge more to have somebody there to do that. But it was a thought because it's central to where everybody is.
Mhm.
But maybe if you approached them, they may see you more as a professional than me. I was there at an event trying to find somebody in the office to ask a question, and she wasn't really the person to ask anyways.
Oh.
Yeah.
I still think that if we can manage it for the rent you're quoting, that the forum is worth it, because everybody seems to know where that is.
Yeah, I think it's a good venue to stick with for now, but we should look at alternatives for the future.
Yeah, just keep our eyes open. And
Yeah.
the fact that we can use their Wi-Fi is a big thing because we have people regularly who tune in on Zoom.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'd have to find something that was a better deal than that, and that's a pretty good deal, so.
Okay, well, I think I'm gonna close the recording here. Let's see, stop recording.